This isn't just a story, it's a cry from the soul of nature. He was born beneath a shadow, a label scrawled across his life before he ever had the chance to speak for himself. Dangerous. Unpredictable. One to watch. These were not the words of someone who knew Jet, not the gentle pup he once was, but of a world too impatient to listen, too fearful to see. By the time he was 8 months old, Jet had endured more than most dogs live through in twice that time. A young pit bull confiscated from a backyard where the only thing louder than the autumn wind was his voice, a voice that cried out into the emptiness, into a neighborhood that had no heart left for his howling. The complaints were filed like paper bullets. He won't stop barking. He's disturbing the peace. But they didn't hear the fear in his bark, the way his chest tightened with every footstep that didn't belong to kindness. His owner shrugged, called it restlessness. Animal control labeled it agitation. The vet, after a brief scan and a few fast notes, called him healthy but high risk. So they moved him, not into a home, not into healing, but into a cage. A concrete shelter carved into the cold outskirts of northern Wisconsin, where the leaves outside turned to gold and fire, and the air whispered frost into every breath. Here, Jet became nothing more than a file number behind steel doors. He was just another intake, another statistic, another misread soul. The Lord is near to the broken-hearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Inside his kennel, Jet paced like a soul looking for a door out of his own body. Round and round, clockwise, counterclockwise. The rhythm wasn't madness, it was survival. His bark echoed like thunder in a canyon, not angry but aching, not mean but misunderstood. He snapped when hands reached too fast, when eyes lingered too long. Not because he wanted to hurt, but because he had never been taught that a hand could bring anything other than pain or silence. The tag outside his enclosure read, "Do not approach." Visitors hurried past, their eyes avoiding his golden gaze. Volunteers whispered about him, not his story, not his suffering, but about the way his eyes never stopped scanning, never stopped searching. But Jet wasn't cruel. He wasn't vicious. He was afraid. Afraid in the way animals are when their hearts have never known safety, only noise. When footsteps echoed down the corridor, he leapt to the gate, tail wagging in short, unsure bursts. Hope flared for a moment, then died again the second he barked, sharp, uncertain. That sound sent them walking away, again. He didn't understand why they feared him, so he paced. He growled, not to scare, but because the storm inside his chest had nowhere else to go. At night, when the shelter finally grew quiet, Jet didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, ears twitching at every creak, at every sorrow held between these concrete walls. He wanted something, anything, a reason to hope, a voice that didn't mean harm, a heart that didn't flinch. Even the wild beasts long for you, Lord, when streams run dry and hearts are abandoned. Then one morning, when the wind outside curled like breath through iron fences, something shifted. A small carrier wheeled in through the back gate. Inside, barely visible through the mesh, 2 wide amber eyes stared out at the world, unblinking. A 3-month-old bobcat, alone, they named her. Sage. She had been found curled beside her mother's lifeless body near the edge of the forest, a place where trees weep silently and bullets leave orphans. The mother hadn't stood a chance. A poacher's aim ended her. But somehow, the baby had survived. She was too young to release. Too wild for foster, and far too fragile to be alone. There was nowhere else to place her. The only kennel quiet and secure enough was next to Jet's. Some thought it was reckless, a mistake. But when Sage was gently placed into her new enclosure and Jet froze mid-pace, not barking, not growling, and simply stared, ... Something ancient stirred. He watched, and she watched back. 2 broken souls, caught in different tragedies, now breathing the same cold air through metal bars. Was it recklessness, or was it redemption? The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and a little child shall lead them. It started with silence. A kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of watching, wondering. Jet, who barked at everything, stood still. Sage, who hissed at every human glance, didn't flinch. They simply observed one another, two creatures the world didn't know how to fix, two hearts no one dared get close to. He would glance at her sideways when she shifted. She would blink slowly when he circled. It was slow, cautious, like trust learning how to breathe again. Then one quiet afternoon, Sage padded up to the mesh separating them. No fear. No hesitation. Just a small body moved by instinct, by curiosity, by the need to not be alone. Jet stopped. His tail stiffened, his breath held, a statue carved from muscle and memory. And then he stepped forward slowly, nose to the fence, a pause, a breath, a moment. They touched. Not paw to paw, but muzzle to muzzle, only cold steel between them. And for the first time since arriving at the shelter, Jet didn't bark, he didn't flinch. He wagged his tail, soft, steady, like a forgotten prayer, whispered back. Into the world. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. 3 days later, the handlers gave Sage a supervised walk through the covered courtyard. She was still too small to explore freely, too wild to roam without watching eyes. But instead of darting for trees or chasing shadows, Sage walked calmly. To Jet's kennel, she sat, just outside his gate, and waited. She didn't paw the bars or cry out. She simply watched him, the first steady presence she had known since her mother's body went still in the forest. Jet didn't bark, didn't pace. He lay down beside the bars, head resting on his paws, eyes meeting hers. And for an hour, they didn't move, not even when a squirrel ran past. Not when doors clanged open and shut. She stayed, he stayed. And something ancient and unseen began to rebuild what the world had shattered in both of them. The staff stood in silence. Number. One understood it, but everyone felt it. The pit bull labeled dangerous, the bobcat labeled untouchable. They weren't healing because of therapy. They were healing because of each other. Out of the wilderness shall spring rivers, and the lion shall lay beside the lamb. The next day, with breath held and hearts clenched, the team decided to open the gates. One for Jet, one for Sage, and waited. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Sage stepped forward, calm, curious, brave. Jet stood still, alert but not stiff. Their eyes met, and then, as if something ancient passed between them, Sage lifted one small paw and placed it gently on his. Jet blinked, lowered his head, stayed there. They had chosen each other, and that was the beginning. What followed was not wild chaos, but something gentler, a language without words. Sage pounced. Jet rolled. Jet barked. She flicked her ears. They danced not with frenzy, but with understanding. Two creatures who knew fear, now rewriting it together. Each day the shelter opened, Sage would trot out first, always looking back to be sure Jet followed. And he always did, no longer loud, no longer lost. He learned to crouch, to stalk leaves, to leap with grace. He learned her rhythm, and in doing so found his own, and the desert shall bloom, and the wild shall find peace. An animal is calling, will you answer? She waited silent and still, then leapt, a soft, playful pounce landing gently on Jet's broad back, as if whispering through action, try again, trust again. And somehow, in that moment, a deeper magic sparked. Sometimes they lay so close together, their fur mingled like threads of the same story. Sage began to eat from Jet's bowl uninvited, unafraid, and he let her, no growl, no snarl, not even a side glance of protest. Just a soft wag of his tail like a silent vow of acceptance. Staff members watched in disbelief, shaking their heads at the transformation unfolding before them. The pit bull once branded unpredictable, the wild animal once deemed untouchable, now moved together like two pieces of a long-lost rhythm finally found. They breathe the same way now, one handler whispered, her voice filled with awe. It wasn't just a bond, it was a kind of sacred language born of trauma and trust, spoken in glances and tail wags, in gentle pounces and shared silences. Two are better than one, for if one falls, the other will lift them up. Then came the school visits. Children from nearby classrooms were brought in to learn about animal welfare and compassion. Little feet shuffled down long corridors, voices filled with curiosity and wonder. One child, eyes wide and sparkling with innocence, pointed at the pair and laughed. "He's like a cat." And Jet, hearing the laughter, spun in a slow circle and dropped into a playbow beside Sage. The room erupted in smiles. But for the shelter staff, who had watched Jet grow from a pacing, barking storm into this gentle reflection of a bobcat's calm, it wasn't mimicry. It was healing, transformation. He hadn't become more dangerous. He had become more tender. In learning to move like a cat, Jet had somehow discovered how to be still, how to listen, how to soften, how to be safe not just to others but to himself. Behind closed doors, though, concern lingered. "He's too attached," one volunteer whispered. "What happens if his instincts take over?" "He's still a pit bull." The shelter leadership didn't have easy answers. No one had ever seen a relationship like this, a wild bobcat and a dog bred for strength, bonded like family. What if something snapped? What if one mistake shattered everything? Love casts out fear. So a decision was made quietly, cautiously, a test, just a few days apart to see how they coped. That afternoon, while Jet was outside in the courtyard, Sage was gently moved into an indoor enclosure for a routine checkup. But when she didn't return, Jet knew. Instinct screamed in his blood. He began pacing again, round and round, the old patterns rushing back like floodwaters. His whines grew sharp, urgent. Then the barking started, once, then again. And again, louder, rougher, until his voice cracked and his throat burned. He refused food, he refused rest. He stared at the gate as if his soul might pull it open. In another room, Sage curled in a tight corner, ears twitching toward the distant cries she couldn't reach. Walls separated them. But even so, he wasn't angry, he wasn't aggressive. Jet was grieving. For the first time, the shelter staff saw a dog not reacting in fear, but hurting in love. And Sage, she didn't hiss, didn't pace. She just lay still, eyes open, body aching, not just from absence, but from heartbreak. "I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you." But then tragedy hovered closer. During a morning stretch, Sage tried to leap onto a wooden beam. Her paw missed. Her small body twisted midair and hit the ground with a soft, sickening thud. A cry echoed out, a high-pitched whimper that cut through walls and hearts alike. "It's a sprain," the vet confirmed, "a bruised muscle. A twisted joint. Painful but not permanent." Still, they moved her into medical isolation again, this time for healing. She lay there, silent, eyes dull with discomfort, and Jet, he listened. He heard every voice outside the medical wing, every whisper. "She's not eating. She hasn't stood all morning. She cries when she moves." And somehow, though he couldn't speak her name, he called for her. Pressing his body to the cold metal gate, he whined low and long, a trembling sound soaked in longing. During walks, he refused to leave the door she disappeared through. He lay there, eyes wide, still and aching. He didn't bark now. He didn't demand. He waited, silently, faithfully, because love had taught him that waiting was its own kind of presence. The righteous care for the needs of their animals. On the morning of the third day, someone made a decision from the heart. Sage needed the comfort of the familiar. So with the gentlest of hands, they returned her to her old enclosure, fresh bedding waiting like a warm embrace. As she entered, Jet stood. He didn't lunge or bark or jump. He simply walked to the edge of his own space and waited, only inches from the barrier. She didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she turned her head, and he leaned forward, touched his nose to her cheek, and gently licked her ear. Not as a greeting, as a welcome home. He hadn't forgotten. He hadn't blamed. He had just waited, and Sage, she didn't flinch. She breathed. For the first time in days, she breathed like she was safe again. Let everything that has breath praise the Lord. In the weeks that followed, as Sage grew stronger and the light returned to her eyes, a call came. From a wildlife rehabilitation center several states away. They had been following Sage's story, reading updates, watching footage, and they were ready. A protected forest reserve designed for animals like her, too wild to live indoors, too tame to survive fully free. A place of meadows and mossy boulders, sunlight and space. But there was one condition. She would need a transitional companion, someone she trusted. Someone who could walk her into this new world. Does she have one? They asked. And the shelter staff didn't even pause. Yes, they said. She has Jet. The idea caused ripples. Some staff hesitated. He's not trained. He's still a pit bull. What if he panics in a new environment? But Sage had already answered. Without words, she followed Jet everywhere. Sought him when frightened. Rested only beside him. Her progress. Always faster when he was near. Her stability. Always stronger in his presence. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was her comfort. Her family, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. With trembling hope and a plan. Built on love, they left together. Jet and Sage. The forest reserve wasn't anything like the shelter. No walls, no barking. Just sky, just breeze, just freedom. It stretched wide and wild trees older than memory, grasses tall enough to sway. Like waves. In the center, a still lake reflected the clouds above like a window into heaven. Sage stepped into it slowly. The smells overwhelmed her. The sounds, so different from concrete halls, made her ears twitch in awe, but she wasn't alone. Jet was there, always just a step behind. He didn't chase. Didn't bark. He followed. He watched. And when she froze in uncertainty near a patch of unfamiliar terrain, he stepped forward, nose to the wind, tail low and calm. As if saying, "It's okay, I'm here," he became her courage. And she became his peace. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. This isn't the end of their story. It's the beginning of everything love can transform. He would always go first. Nose low, ears forward. A sentinel in the wild, Jet would step across. Fallen logs or into shallow streams before her, his golden eyes sweeping the path ahead. It's safe, his body seemed to say. I'll go first. He wasn't her playmate anymore. He had become something else entirely. Her guardian, her anchor, her home in motion. The volunteers at the wildlife reserve, many of them seasoned. Professionals who had worked with wolves, lynx, and bears watched in stunned silence. We've worked with dozens of animals, one whispered, arms crossed tightly, trying to make sense of it. We've never seen anything like this. Another added, almost reverently, this isn't training. This is something deeper. Something sacred. And indeed it was, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me. To bind up the broken-hearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives. Sage grew stronger. Her limp faded, gradually and completely. She began to climb again, higher this time, her paws more certain, her balance fierce. She ran with the confidence of wind skimming across a lake. Her eyes sharpened, her body grew leaner, swifter, freer with each passing week. The forest once, a place of danger and loss now, called to her like a mother singing a lullaby, and slowly instinct answered. At first, she disappeared into the trees for just an hour. Then 2, then half a day. Jet would wait always by the water's edge. His nose lifted toward the wind, eyes focused on the trail she took. He didn't whimper. Didn't bark. He simply waited, faithful, silent, and every time. As the golden sun melted into the horizon, she returned always until the day she didn't. There is a time to hold on and a time to let go. The next day she stayed longer. And then longer still. Her instincts had risen quiet but sure, and they were no longer whispers. They were roars. She was no longer a frightened cub carried in a crate. She was something more now, something wild. Something whole. Jet understood. He didn't cry for her, didn't panic. He walked the trail she had taken, once more, slowly. And then he sat beneath the trees where she had last curled to rest. He looked outward not to find her, but to honor her journey. To honor what they had created together. Because Jet hadn't just given her companionship, he had given her the safety to grow. The courage to return to her original purpose. And Sage, she had given him something just as rare. A reason to trust? A softness he didn't know his soul could carry, a love that never needed words. A bond born not of ownership, but of pure, unbroken presence. And though they slowly let each other go, it wasn't with sorrow, it wasn't goodbye. It was transformation, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. When Sage was finally ready to live fully on her own, Jet returned to the shelter where their story had begun. But he wasn't the same dog. He walked through those metal gates with no tension in his body, no anxious pacing, no raw-barked cries echoing against concrete. He moved with a calm purpose, like a sage returning from the mountains, carrying quiet wisdom in every step. The volunteers who had once tiptoed around his kennel now greeted him not with caution but with respect, admiration, love. Something inside Jet had changed. The fire that once burned uncontrollably now glowed like a steady flame. He didn't bark wildly at the slam of a door. He didn't snap when hands reached toward him. He simply observed, waited, responded with grace. Because Sage had taught him the language of patience, the strength in gentleness. You will be called restorer of broken walls, repairer of streets with dwellings. Then something beautiful happened. New dogs arrived, frightened, withdrawn, labeled just as he had been, too much, too reactive, too broken. They shook in their kennels, flinched from touch, barked at ghosts, but Jet didn't flinch, he didn't judge. He sat beside their enclosures, still and quiet, watching, waiting. When they were ready, when their eyes flickered with curiosity, he would invite them. Not with force, not with dominance, but with grace. A nudge of his nose, a slow wag of his tail, an invitation to trust again. Somehow, they did. One by one, the other dogs began responding not to commands, but to Jet's presence. It wasn't training, it was legacy. The gift Sage had given him, he was now giving to others. Let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. The shelter staff saw it, felt it, documented it. Jet was doing something no one had ever taught him. He was healing others. Not through dominance, but through dignity. Not by leading, but by sitting beside those who were scared. And so they gave him a new role, an official one. Today, Jet is a core member of the shelter's emotional socialization program. He meets new arrivals. He comforts them. He teaches them, silently, that not all hands hurt, that not all cages last forever, that even the scariest changes can lead to peace. Visitors began asking about him, families, adopters, even out-of-state travelers. They saw his story online. They wanted to bring him home. But Jet had already chosen his home. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. He stayed. Not for comfort, not because he had nowhere to go. He stayed for the anxious pups, for the misread souls, for the ones like him once labeled too much, too wild, too dangerous. Jet stayed because now he understood. He didn't need to be feared. He didn't need to prove anything. He had already become who he was meant to be. Jet had been born with a label, but Sage had erased it. He didn't become a predator. He became a protector, a friend, a guide, a miracle dot, and in saving her, he saved himself, and now he's saving others. If stories like this move you, stay with us. Subscribe to Jungle Diaries to witness the quiet heroes, the second chances, the wild hearts rewriting every rule we thought we knew, because love doesn't follow labels, it rewrites them.